Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
All right, Dave, you've made quite a career for yourself selling things.
Yes, I have.
A lot of farmland, a lot of farm equipment, a lot of farm assets. And a lot of our listeners sell things. So this is probably a really good episode that we can put together some additional information around some skills that you might be able to pick up to maybe make yourself a better salesperson or maybe make you understand a salesperson a little bit better. Mm-hmm. We are going across the pond. That's the other part of the fun part of this episode is we found ourselves an expert. So we're going to get to meet Sinjin here, and we learned that he's fresh off of Tanner Street, so we know we already kind of like him.
Yeah, right.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, guys.
Hey, Sinjin, what's your tie to agriculture? Let's start there. We're an agriculture podcast. What's your tie?
Yeah, well, I come off farm in the UK. My dad used to be a director of Dow Geddes, and I lost my way, not in a mental state, just like in my career, I sort of left the farming fold. And I'd grown up on a farm since I was a kid, moved to Australia, now live in New Zealand, and I come back to farming. I've come full circle from my corporate days and ad agency days. And yeah, farming's kind of like always been in my blood. I've really enjoyed hanging around with farming people. I think they're good folk. They're honest people. Honest trade, working off the land. So I find myself back in agriculture. I have my own rural sales show podcast, and we jam on rural sales psychology and trying to help people understand how to sell or how to buy better. We cover market and lead generation, but yeah, that's kind of stuff we do.
Rural sales psychology. Tanner.
Rural sales psychology. How to sell or buy better.
Yeah. See, now
this is going to be perfect.
I've always thought type A personalities make better salesmen. More the introvert, if you can't get out there and, say hi, you're probably not the guy. But I think we're going to dive into this a little bit, Tanner.
Yeah. So why do you think this show is going to be important to our listeners?
Well, I think it's really important if your listeners, as we said on the intro, a lot of your listeners will probably be selling in some way, even though they might not admit that. I mean, everyone, when we talk about sales, they have an off-farm income that's supporting, obviously, the farm income. So a lot of your listeners might be selling machinery, feed, agronomics, seed, I think I've already said that, agri-tech, whatever they're into. And they obviously generally make really good salespeople, men or women. But often we see a lot of farming salespeople fail and suffer unnecessarily because they don't understand how to sell. And they don't understand the buyer's brain.
Yeah, and then you flip it, right? Because what if you're the buyer? What if you really don't sell anything? You still sell. You still sell in relationships. You still sell in conversations. You still sell at church. Everybody sells, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think?
Yeah, we are.
Go ahead.
There's this sort of stigma with sales, this connotation that, somehow my sales is somehow below my identity or my sense of self-worth. But ultimately, if you're running a business, whether it's a farming business or a business that you're running off-farm that you're employed to supplement your farm income, we're all in the industry of sales. We're all in the business of sales. And you can get fancy and talk about negotiation, persuasion, influence, and maybe we'll get into a bit of that if time allows. But the reality is you need to understand how you are received and perceived as a salesperson, how the buyer brain perceives and receives and processes a salesperson, and the psychological kind of journey they go on depending on whether they're a warm or a cold prospect. So, perhaps we can get into that.
Yeah, let's jump into the psychology.
Today, when you guys came to the podcast, I was on a sales call trying to sell me software. And the only reason I took the call is, I'll start off with this. The gal who called me was relatable. And since she was relatable, I'm like, all right. She's like, all right, Dave, I'm just going to shoot my shot. Can you give me 5 minutes to give you this presentation? I really need it. And she was relatable because I'm a sales guy. I was like, yeah, I want people to listen to me too. So you must have something good. And I did. I listened and I liked her product. I don't know if I'll buy it, but I liked it. So I tell you what, Sinjin, tell us what you know.
So, like, the good thing that your lady's done there is she's focused on making you psychologically feel safe. So she's worked on the emotional before the functional and then the financial. So we call that the value equation. So the first thing you've got to do in sales is you've got to signal massive buyer safety. So when people feel unsafe, which they ultimately do, awesome to see you guys writing this stuff down. When buyers feel unsafe, they feel vulnerable. And when they feel vulnerable, unsafe, they are not going to disclose their inner pains and problems. You know, do not rock up and say, tell me what your biggest pain points are, Dave or Tanner. Like, what keeps you up at night? Or like, how do I win your business back? That is all sleazy, salesy, horrible, cheesy stuff that died in the 1980s along with power suits. So like, what we need to do is we need to focus on, first of all, making a connection. I really like the way she framed it. Hey, can you give me a shot? Or you can disarm your prospect by going, hey, you know this is a cold call. I'm going to try and sell you something, A.
Right.
So we say A lot down here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But like Canadians. So what you're doing is you're disarming that automatic guessing machine, which is, oh, no, here's another rural rep trying to sell me something. Or here's a sales rep trying to sell me something. Because we all suffer as human beings, because the buyer brain buys the same regardless of the sector, and everyone says their business is different. It's rubbish. The buyer's brain is the same, and I can break that down in a minute, is that we all have a reactance theory. So the psychs call this reactance theory. I'll give you an example. Down here and down under, our government said don't panic buy. So what did we all go and do?
Panic buy.
We went and panic buy because we react to being told what to do. And as you know, your listeners and your farmers, you don't like being told what to do. My kids don't like being told what to do. We react when people try to over control. So when you try and control the sale, you make your buyer feel unsafe, and they're less likely to cough up the real specificity that spits the cash and nails the deal.
Nice. Got to make them feel safe, Dave. You got to first start with that. What else?
So, I mean, the other thing as well, the biggest driver when it comes to understanding sales, I think you've got to be a student of psychology. This doesn't mean you need to read a ton of books and become a professor and have lots of letters. You just got to understand the basic laws of human motivation. And one of the basic laws is that humans are all about self-preservation. It's all about them and it's not about you. I often say to all my students, and I train a lot of the machinery guys here, a couple in California, the agronomy, the irrigation guys, the agritech guys, I said the problem with sales is selling. Problem with sales is selling. The more you try to sell, the less you will sell. What you need to do instead is flip it, like you said, Tanner, flip it completely and go, hey, I've got something that I'm not even sure will work for you and your farm. I don't know if it's going to work in your system, but I've got a couple of questions to qualify if it makes sense to us have a chat, and even if it's going to work. I've immediately disarmed you because I'm not actually selling to you. I'm serving your needs rather than my own, which is the majority of rural reps aren't trained to do this. They serve the best interest of themselves rather than the best interest of their customers, so they don't make as many sales. So when I ask you and say, hey, Tanner, tell me what a good season looks like for you.
Right.
I'm serving your needs.
Right.
And then I'm actually doing something nice and clever there, which is I'm getting you to imagine an anchor to a commitment state in the future. And then I'm going to bring you back to the present and say, tell me about where you are now. And you're saying, I need more yield, or I need more milk solids, or I need more live weight gain, whatever it's that you're into. So how's that going? Where are you at? Where do you sit now versus where you want to be? What have you done? What's worked? What's not? You just got to ask really, really good questions, okay? You know, the verbal vomit, show up, throw up, feature, creature, routine does not work, especially with farmers, right? And this is obviously what we specialize in, is teaching buyers how to make their teaching sellers how to make their farmers buy using buyer safety.
Well, I like that you just framed up a successful way to anchor a vision in the future just by, if you genuinely do this, you are genuinely curious about their operation. If you step in there and you say, how's the crop year looking? What does a successful crop year look like next fall for you? Okay, if we're going to try and get 260 bushel corn, we now need to know how much fertilizer have you put on. Do you have the right planter technology? Are you're uncovering through questions And if done properly, I assume they will discover they need your product if you really have a product they need.
See, I've had people do that, and then towards the end of the call, they said, "Well, your words, you said this, that, and the other." Like Gal today, she says, "What? Just pretend for a second. If you could fix anything in your company, what would you fix?" And so I give her something, and then of course she came right back to it at the end. Well, you said that you would really want to fix this, and our product does that. So it did make an anchor statement to come back. Sinjin, is there a? So I sell farmland. And farmland isn't something that you just, I sell my service rather. I sell my service of selling farmland. And
you
so
actually sell yourself. Sorry, jump in, Dave. You sell yourself first before you sell any farmland.
very
Right.
much so. And so to the seller, I do that. And how that comes, I'm going to say 100% is trust. They have to trust that I have the ability to help them or assist them with that. How do we do more with trust? Or what's your thoughts on that?
So I'm laughing because I'm so glad you asked that question. Before I answer that question, I just want to quickly go back to Tanner. It's so easy to remember Tanner's name because I live on the street. There must be some distant relative, Tanner, here in New Zealand. You talked about a very important word there for your listeners, which is curiosity. And curious people ask really, really good questions. So I just didn't want to lose that for the listeners. It's very, very important. Questions in a sales conversation do all the heavy lifting for you. You ask the right questions, Dave, you're completely right, then the customer is more likely to close themselves. So, right, back to you now, Dave, on trust. Now, I was being very Tourette's and interrupting you, which is very naughty of me, and going, hey, actually the first thing you're selling is yourself. Now, Alan Weiss, who's a wonderful guy over in the States that writes beautiful books, he says the first sale is to yourself. People mistake that and interpret that to mean the product or service that they sell. What it really means, and I've learned this over the years, personally myself and with the teams that I train, the first sell is to yourself is actually yourself to yourself. So farmers buy people before they buy businesses. Mm-hmm. So they've got to buy into you, but in order to buy into you, you've got to be bought into yourself. So you need to be sold on yourself, and you need to trust yourself. So when you have got your... Can I swear? When you've got your shit dialed in your systems, and you've set the standards and you've reached them, then you can trust yourself, and you command, and you have a confidence and conviction in your conversation that others don't have. I believe and buy into that buoyancy belief, and they buy into you, and then they buy into the product or service or piece of land that you're selling.
There's a lot of what your statement applies to that are listeners that are trying to sell themselves to landlords, to be able to get access to a larger land base, more pasture, whatever they're looking for, a landlord. If you don't have yourself sold on yourself as to why you could take care of the land the best or be a strong performer or what value you bring to the table, that's going to make it really hard for that landlord to want to pick you over somebody else also.
I'll give this to our co-host, Corey, who's not here. I called him yesterday and asked questions about anhydrous and an application, and he knew every answer to every question I had and went in detail over my head, and it just made me say, man, that guy knows what he's talking about. And my wife was listening on the speakerphone and said, man, he knows. And it made me think, what you just said, if I had to trust somebody, I know this guy, he knows more than I know, I guarantee it, and I knew that he would be a guy to rent that. And I wonder if that doesn't come off, Sinjin, as cocky a little bit, because just what you said, you gotta believe you can do it yourself. I've said from day one, you want to hire the best, you're hiring me, period. And I 100% believe it. Not any kind of cocky. It is literally, I feel we do a better job than any other person on the market. And so it's easy to sell myself because everything that exuberates out says, look, this is why we've studied this, we've done that. And we probably sold it to myself before I ever tried to sell it to anybody else. But is there a line between confidence, cocky, and just knowledge?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a difference, obviously, between confidence and arrogance. I think the most important is you never talk about yourselves. You get other people to talk about it. It's like the player, the best player. We have the All Blacks down here. They're a pretty good rugby team. They have a really high winning rate. I think about 83%. And our former captain Richard McCoy says, "I let my play do the talking." and he lets his players do the talking. So he does all his plays on the field. He doesn't talk off the field. He obviously does talk off the field. He's not mute, but like he makes sure that what he does is what he is, and he lets the results speak for themselves. So culturally, Aussie's probably a bit closer to America. New Zealand's a little more British and a little more modest and humble. I think it's awesome. You obviously got massive supreme confidence in yourself because you're really good at what you do. But the best thing to do to make sure you don't exceed that sort of confidence, overconfidence, bias, and arrogance or perception of, is to say, look, I can talk and crap on about how good I am. The best thing is actually just really look at the results and the company that I keep.
Yeah, and I was thinking that for like Corey and Cash Rent. So to a lot of our listeners that would rent somebody else's farm could say exactly that, Tanner. They could say, well, look at the land stewardship we've done for XYZ clients before. That's why I'd be good on your farm, without saying that's why I'd be good. I like that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is to, when you were talking to, was it Corey, and he was answering everything and he just nailing it. This is like, we need to kind of read the room, right, and read the signals, because we're human beings, right? Like the sale's made in the conversation. It's not made in the proposal, the quote. It's made in the conversation. So if you are going up for a landlord and you want that piece of land and you're presenting yourself, you want to present yourself in the best possible manner. You've got to have the track record of stewardship that you talked about. Most importantly, have referees that say, it's just like us when we sell. We have case studies, countless, mountains of case studies where we've got results. And that's your reputation. Your reputation is everything. The other thing is, what you really want to do, if you want to take command of that conversation in a non-commanding way, what you do is you answer the questions or objections that they have before they're asked. So what you do is you nullify and neutralize the objections, and they go, whoa, this dude knows what he's talking about. So when you're speaking to your landlord, now I'm guessing you're thinking that you need someone that is going to really look after your land, do this, do that, do that, do that, do that. Have I got that right? So you're checking in with them, and they're going, damn right, you've got that right. They might not verbalize that, but you'll see them nodding and watching the congruence of their body language. So what you do is you say, and I suspect that the concerns you might have are X, Y, and Z. And they'll go, yeah, I have. So I want to give you the assurance that is not the person I am. Now, something else, so I know I'm barreling along here, but something else that is really, really useful as well is that you talk about the identity. You talk to the identity of the farmer. Now, this is a really good little, I'm not all Chris Boss here because he's a master. I'm no good at this, but I've learned a few things along the way. And what it does is when you finish that conversation with your landlord in that specific context, in that conversation, you say, hey, look, Tanner, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I've learned a lot. Really good to hear about the family. I love what you've invested in here on the tracks or the milk shed or the grain silo or whatever else. I'm going to leave you be. If you need any more information, let me know, but I know you'll make the right decision for you and your farm. Now, why am I doing that? I'm doing that because they want to feel safe, and I'm calling out the identity that they will make accurate and informed decisions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Here's the line that your listeners need to write down. It is, really good to chat with you, Tanner or Dave, or whoever it is. Learned a lot, blah, 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 blah. Hey, what's really most important to me here is you make the most accurate, informed decision for you and your farm. And why does that work? It works because people want to make the most accurate, informed decision for their farm. It's in their best interests to do that. So you're just calling that out, and I know you'll make the right decision for you and your farm and your family. And so what you're doing is you're calling out their identity, which they then buy into. It's a pre-frame.
Yep.
Now, everyone goes, oh, St. John, that's manipulative and it's all, a bit shit. It's not. The reality is it's in their best interest. Buyers, that landlord that's buying into you, wants to feel safe. Mm-hmm. And they want to make accurate, informed decisions, because if they make bad decisions, it's not going to go very, very well for you or for them. So you call it out.
I like that.
See, and I've often said, instead of sales, like even on my title, I put trusted advisor. Mm-hmm. I don't put sales. You said something just a little bit ago that I underlined. and I think it's the best thing that I've ever learned. The sale is made in the conversation. Okay, if that's the case, every new salesman that I have and every new salesman that's out there says, how do I get into the conversation? What techniques do you have to get? I mean, mine is all relationships, sphere of influence. And so I know these people from church. I know these people from the podcast. I know these people from football. I know these people from there. And they all know, because I've branded myself, that I sell this product. How does the new guy that is a new seed salesman, that's listening to our podcast right now, how do they tell people like, hey, I just got this job as a seed salesman and now I want to have more sales? They got to get in front of the person is what I would tell them as their boss. You have to shake hands with them and the sale is made in the conversation. How do we get there?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But what I do is give the short version. If you're talking about the context of cold calling and canvassing and prospecting and driving up new driveways and creating new conversations, and then we'll break down the conversation for the listeners. Here's the trick. Your best prospects look like your best customers. Mm-hmm. So what it is you talk to your best customers, you love them, you do a great job for them, and you say, hey, you know how we fix that for you? Who else do you think it is that would help in the same way? I'm specifically looking for this type of farmer who's got this kind of problem. Are there any names that come to mind? And then they go, boom, bingo. So what it is you can use your biggest asset, apart from your reputation, because we know farming communities are tight world over, is the fact that your network is your net worth. But your biggest asset is your actual existing farming customers or the reputation that the business has already. Now, you might have inherited a new territory from a really bad rep. Now, how you neutralize that, I hope I'm not overwhelming you guys. How you neutralize that is you don't ask for the word feedback. Anyone else feedback fatigue? Like you get your rental car and your company car and, hey, how was our experience? And it's like, just forget that. I'm feedback fatigue. What you do is you go and ask that farmer, hey, I realized that we used to do some work with you guys. We haven't for a wee while. I don't mind. I'd just love to get your advice and learn and improve where we went wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, asking for advice is a very sincere way of flattering someone's intelligence because we're not asking for feedback because they just go, ugh. Asking for advice honors them and their intelligence. So if you are a seed rep or you're earning an off-farm income or you're doing agronomy or chemicals or crop science or whatever you're into or farm machinery, what you want to be doing is you want to be going out there and you want to be talking to your existing customers and then finding lookalike customers that look like your best customers. Then, when it comes to the conversation, like a pilot, like a surgeon, like military, like search and rescue, you don't leave the conversation to chance. You plan and prepare for it. Mm-hmm. And you make sure you ask really, really good questions like the ones we spoke about.
I like that. You know, Dave, I used to use that where I'd show up to an ideal client, top-tier client, but I would also come with a list of names of people that I assumed were going to be like them, to where I didn't have to wait for them to think of somebody. They could still think, but I could say, do any of these people look or do business like you or you have respect for, to jumpstart that conversation? Because sometimes it rolled into, but then also you should talk to somebody else. You get a new name on the list.
Yep.
Yeah, so
See, now I've had folks that will, and it kind of rubs me raw, is I got one sales lady, she's relentless, and she calls all the time. So I'll give her that, tenacity and persistence. But she always says, well, your competitor is doing this. Well, these guys are doing this. You know, they spend a full-page ad with me.
I knew it was a media rep.
And I'm like, I don't care what they did. I'm better than them. So I don't need to do it, whatever. It drives me nuts when they try to use my competition against me, though.
Yep.
Because it doesn't make you feel safe. So the problem is with media reps and radio reps or trade publications is they pester. And they're not persistent, Dave. They're insistent. There is a difference.
Yep.
So when you're following up with someone, you've got to be polite, you've got to be persistent, and you've got to be professional. And don't fatigue your follow-up, like just checking in, just following up, just touching base. What you need to do is mix up your message and go, hey, Dave, I've been thinking about you and your real estate business, and we've actually got a column that's going to be happening every quarter, and we wanted to know if you want to be that writer. And in a result, we will need some advertising commitment from you, but we're going to give some editorial and some column inches. So when I train my clients, I talk to them, one of my 10 commandments is thou shalt not commit to print advertising unless you get exchanged for editorial.
I see.
Yeah.
Yep. Because then you're not just the ad, you're the trusted advisor again because it's content.
But the
And
follow-up is tough. Like we're in a position right now with one of the partners, partner to advertising, and we want to follow up. But you're right. We've been doing our best to try and come up with a creative, different way to touch base with them because we still feel like we've got great value to bring to their brand. So it's, hey, we were just out doing this and thought of you. This would be a really cool experience. Hey, this is because it's hard to not just say, do you have an answer yet?
So is this
have you set your budget yet? Do you know yet?
Is this a bad move? Is this a bad move? A lot of my clients, I want to follow up because time has been, when they're ready to fire, you can tell, and they're ready to fire, and I don't want to be last to the table. But so I'll often follow up, and oftentimes I've said this is, hey, I don't want to be an annoying sales guy. I just want to make sure I'm not dropping the ball. Is there anything else you need from me? And I hate when people ask, well, when do you want me to check in with you? I'll check it. That's my job to remember to check in with them. Not hey, tell me 10 days down the road they haven't looked at their calendar. Is that bad for me to just say that? Like, I don't want to be an annoying sales guy, so tell me if it's too much, but I want to make sure I'm not dropping the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So the subconscious here is annoying sales guy.
Okay. So don't use that. You just framed yourself.
Instead, when we pre-call plan our conversation, you and I are having a chat, Dave, and then I'm ending the conversation, and I'm going, cool. So, Dave, what do you feel the next step should be?
I got you.
And then the farmer or whoever you're selling to goes, well, I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Trusted Advisor? They don't call you that.
Yeah.
I'm cautious about Trusted Advisor on a business card, but we'll get to that because it's a bit self-congratulatory in my view. So what it needs to be is I and you are having a conversation. I'm closing that conversation, not closing the sale, but I'm advancing it to the next stage. And what I'm doing is I'm handing the baton to you and going, what do you feel our next step should be here? And they go, well, actually, I want a proposal. Now, proposals or quotes, that's another subject for another day on premature proposals and wasting time. I could spend 20 minutes talking about that. That's be careful there. But what it is, you then pass the baton to them and they go, well, I don't know. What do you think? You go, right. Okay. Based on what we spoke about and the specific things we spoke about, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to come back and see you next Tuesday at 4:00. Should we put the date in the diary now? And it doesn't matter. We can always move it if things change close to the time. How does that sound? You nail them. You nail the meeting and anchor the meeting there. You do not wait or hope, oh, we'll get back to you. Because then you don't need to have that conversation. Because you're then using, again, the commitment bias that's anchored them in the meeting. And then you leverage that meeting to then get another meeting if they have to change it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I have, I've gone as far as, hey, the connection, they say, yeah, just follow up with me next week or give me 10 days. I love that you scheduled it. I already know that it's 4:00 next Thursday. We have a standing calendar invite.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, you have to go out and cancel it or you have to go out and reschedule it.
Yes, because your sales manager, when they're looking at the CRM or the pipeline, is going, have you got a date in the diary? Because I always say to my students, if it isn't in the diary, it doesn't exist. I run my life by my calendar, by my diary. So if we're not in there, it doesn't exist. It's invisible. Like verbiage and verbal counts for nothing. Do we have a date in the diary? What is the objective of that meeting? What are the outcomes? What are the questions? And we go from there.
I like to flip this too, because a lot of our listeners, deal with salespeople, and I hear too many times that they don't get good follow-up. If you are the buyer, you could flip this in your favor as well. If it's a product you're really interested in, if you're trying to go buy a new tractor, or someone's looking into a replacement motor or something, that salesperson, instead of you sitting here waiting for them to go search for a product, you can say, how about we connect again Wednesday at 8 a.m. and get a status update on what you've uncovered or the information that you've gotten. That can work on the buyer side too.
But you know what's going on there, though, eh? There's some signals being sent here, and it's really important to pick up on it in that conversation. Is if you're having to follow up more and your sales cycles are longer, it's an indication that the quality of your conversation wasn't very good. Because
Interesting.
you haven't established priority or urgency or the buying committee or the process of how the decision's been made. I've seen this time and time again where someone comes in real hot, all fuzzed up, wants to buy, and then disappears and goes cold. The reason for that, and I'll share it with your listeners so they don't have to go through the same pain I did many, many times, is you didn't understand how that purchasing process or that buying process was being made. So what you did is you put your happy ears on and went, oh, yeah, sold. Well, no, it isn't sold. How does a decision like this get made around here?
Let's back up to the calendar for just a second. Do you guys know what Calendarly is?
Yes, I hate it.
Calendly? I hate it too. Don't ask me to find an appointment when you are available. That's making you more important. What's your opinion on that?
Look, I think this is the symmetry of the sale. The thing is, if you are the trusted advisor, they should respect you, because if you respect yourself and your expertise, they'll respect you and know that you're a valuable, scarce resource. Sometimes you have to train your farmers to that position, and you have to train your pipeline. I run my life by my calendar, and it's not because I'm superior, but it's like I don't want to spend time going back and forth. Here's a Calendly link. Find a slot that works for you, and we'll talk then. Now, for me, I'm selling B2B. Some of them are farmers. They're rural business owners. They've all got farming operations, big and small and indifferent. I don't think that's a problem. I think the thing is, it's more around concern might come from the fact that you don't feel, you might feel that feels superior. It's not about being superior. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, guys. That happens all the time.
I love it. It's like a thought.
It's a thought bubble. Yeah,
it's a thought came in your head.
What the heck is a thought bubble?
I thought it was like a fart bubble, like you're saying in the intro.
Yes.
But, so what it is you need to make sure that you are really, really clear on what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, and put the date in the note. And if you're just asking them to pick a time, I mean, it's a little bit impersonal. Most farmers are more manual. Like, have you got a diary? Have you got your phone there? Let's just chuck a date in the diary now. You don't send them a Calendly link because they're not a corporate. Yes, they are a corporate. If you're dealing with a corporate, yes, use it. But I don't think that's so much of a drama, because they should respect the fact that you're busy. There's nothing wrong in a sales meeting to say, hey, I've got a hard deadline at 3:00 and I've got an appointment straight after this. So we're going to need to finish at 3, because you're busy and you're in demand and you're valuable and you're a scarce resource. Don't manufacture it, create it.
Right.
So one of the things, and I think you were going down that direction before I went back to a calendar, but I wrote a note here that to ask you, do you have signals for our newer salespeople or experienced salespeople? One of the things I do is talk too much. And so when I do talk too much, I need to know when, hey, you've already won the sale. Shut up and sign the paper. And so it took me a while to tell myself to shut up. Are there signals of when people are ready to buy that we should be looking for?
Yeah, great question, Dave. Usually they lean in and they've been talking about detail or risk or price, and they're not pricing you. They're actually talking about how they pay it and the insurance or the finance and everything else. Once it's sold, it's sold. Your advice is spot on, 100%. You shut up, it's sold. And then you say, right, we're going to get the paperwork to you. And that's it. And then you thank them and then you go, you're done. I think sometimes we talk too much because we're more interested in trying to, and this may be you, Dave, I'm not sure, I could be doing you a huge injustice here, huge disservice. I've seen a lot of people who are very, very smart not be very smart in a sales conversation. Because what they're doing is they're trying to show their technical prowess.
Okay.
So they're trying to show how they're technically superior, which is where I think your Calendly thing is coming from. I might be wrong. But what it is if we overwhelm the customer, that, I teach a lot of vets and a lot of agronomists, and it's very much, another thought bubble, it's very much an affliction of vets and agronomists who have very good technical skills, but they don't have very good emotional or conversational skills. So what we have to do is make sure you're truly tuned in and watching that prospect like a hawk. And when they say, yep, cool, let's do this, or can we talk about details, talk about risk, and then they move in, you've got to be a blind person not to spot that. But the problem is you're so preoccupied with showing your technical prowess or superiority, you've lost it because you're blind.
I like that. That's good. But I want to spend the next 10 minutes before we wrap up talking about the negotiation process. A lot of our listeners are in sales. all of our listeners have to go through some form of a negotiation. Whether it's, I was even thinking about my in-laws. They're trying to sell a 30-foot disc. And some of these sales techniques, when people come by to look at the disc, brother-in-law's so frustrated he has to measure the distance between the disc blades and how tall it is when it's folded up. No, you have to give them the information, the solution, the answer, if you want to sell them your product. But now let's go negotiations, because even if it's just with your wife at home or the seed salesperson or all of these things, when we talk negotiations, what kind of tips do you have?
Really good. I'm no expert on negotiation, more on sales, although there's a little bit in there that I'll try and help with. When you negotiate, you need to be negotiating from a position of power, not one of weakness. Now, this isn't us getting power hungry. The simplest way to have power is the ability to equal the power that your buyer has, which is to walk away. The only way you get that power is earning that right is by having a pipeline that is pulsating with prospects. It is plentiful, bountiful. It is packed to the brim with options. And that confidence, that true confidence, comes because you've got other options too.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can say, hey, look, actually, was it your brother-in-law that's selling the disc? Actually, we've got 5 people turning up to look at this today. Preferably get them all to turn up at the same time. That would be my little tip. And then you'll create scarcity. And so what happens is in humans, we have 3 kind of behaviors. We usually chase that moves away from us, like concert tickets or a rarity. We want things that we cannot have, and we only place a value on things that are difficult to obtain or achieve. So what we want to do in negotiation is say, actually, less is more, and I've learned this the hard way, is when something's plentiful, it's a commodity. When something's rare, it's a premium. So the reality is, say you're selling those discs, you've got 5 people turning up. They're all looking at them. They will sell. What's your best price? And this is the same in sales. You've got to have loads of options and loads of prospects, because if you don't, and you're not in a position of power, you're in a position of weakness, you're going to get needy. You're going to get desperate for the deal, and you're going to get punished on price. And the farmers can smell it. The buyer can smell it. So you have to have the conviction and confidence to know that you can walk away because you've got lots of other options.
And I would argue, Dave, in the world of negotiating around inputs, you've got lots of options for seed companies, fertilizer reps, places that you're going to sell your grain to. That's a tough one when we go back to that anchoring question about landlords. Because unless you've really started to build your funnel for expanding your land base, this might be the only chance you got at Martha's ground. So if you don't have a position of power, St. John, what else can we rely on? What if this is the only farm in our area that we've had a chance to rent in the last year or two?
Yeah. So back to the landlord context, it's where they've got the power and you haven't, right? Because that's the only piece of land you've got. So why is it that's the only piece of land?
Good question. That's right. There's other things that could be fixed.
Your network might not be big enough either.
Right.
Maybe they're the only ones that are seeing you and you're not seeing everybody else. But what you're talking about, Tanner, I just wrote down at the same time. I wrote competition. So in my market for sales, you talked about 5 or 6 different seed companies. Well, there's 10 or 12 different farmland sales company. And to be quite honest, we're all good and we all do it very similar. So it's what sets you apart that they'd want to use you. What do you have? I mean, same for Corey or any tenant that's trying to rent ground. There's 5 or 6 farmers around the area that we could have rent this farm ground. And in our world, St. John, it's all price. And so whether it's farm ground and we're paying $350 cash rent or $400 cash rent, or selling farms and I charge 3%, but my competitor charges 2%. And I might charge more than they do. I think it's what sets you apart in my world, but I'm anxious to hear.
No, I agree. I would rather be more expensive than cheaper, because usually cheap comes at a cost. There's a reason they're 2% and there's a reason why I'm 3%. Would you like to know why?
Ooh, I like that.
Would you like to know why?
Would you like to know why?
So we are a wee bit more than the other guys. Would you like to know why?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a track record of leasing land at a higher price or a higher yield than anyone else in the county. And we work with some of the biggest farmers, but rather than me prattle on, just talk to them. We prefer our results to talk rather than us.
I was in a sales call once, and a gal told me, with high-end clients, very well-to-do folks for fundraising, and at the time I was only charging like $300. She says, "Dave, you need to be charging $3,000." And I went, "There is no way I can do that." And she said, "I guarantee," she knows the market, and she said, "I know all of your competition is probably charging that." She said, "I want you to say this." And I didn't quite want to at the time, but she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, maybe you're just not ready for my level of service yet." And I thought, man, that's totally discrediting the client. But she said, I know she was playing on the psychology of these folks. They're used to being the best. And she wanted to play on the fact that, well, if they're not ready, what do you mean I'm not ready? And they would bristle up. Now, hold on a second. Tell me more about your level of service. And by golly, I tried it a couple times, and it worked. But I don't know if it's right, but it seemed to work. And because they did not want to be outsold that there's a higher level of service that they're not good enough for.
Yeah, it's kind of a reverse psych kind of power play. I don't mind it. I always live by this maxim: the more someone pays, the more they pay attention.
No.
The more they pay, the more they pay attention. So what it is, you know, when your man Ronald Reagan, and he was up against, who was he? Was he up against Nixon on the telly? I can't remember which one.
I think so, yes.
He said, "Please forgive me, you know, for their youthful
yep.
and their youthful experience or something." And it was a slight. It was a sort of backhanded sort of criticism done in a beautiful way that Ronnie did. And I always sort of say, if you have pricing problems, it's because you have positioning problems.
Mm-hmm.
So where you position yourself in the marketplace is very, very important. So if you want to be at the high end, act high end, have high end customers, have high end website, have a high end customer experience, map that experience, have the best clients, because the best work with the best. And that's the reason why we're 3% and the rest of them are 2%, because the best work with the best. Judging by the company I keep, let my results talk for me rather than me talk to you.
Boy, I love these conversations. Obviously, Dave and I have written notes this entire show. I know a lot of our listeners are going to write notes their entire time, but before I summarize our conversation today, do you have any parting thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the best advice I got was you need to be sold on yourself. And I think the biggest thing is true confidence comes from competence. So you cannot bullshit, misfabricate, and fire yourself up and pump your tires. True confidence comes from competence. I'm a confident guy because I try continually be a lifelong learner. I invest significant sums of money in my personal and professional development. I read a lot. I learn a lot. I love learning. And that is a natural confidence from the compound effect of the competence. So if I'm high on competency, I'm high on confidence. So that would be my advice.
And I like that.
Never stop learning.
Go ahead.
Never stop learning.
Yes.
So never stop learning. Always be a student of psychology. There's some beautiful books out there. You know, we can put some of them and stuff like that. But the more you understand humans' needs, the better chance you have of meeting them.
I love that. One of the questions that we didn't ask that I had circled was, where does one gain perspective? And I think to answer that as I roll into my summary, so as we sit through those to how does one gain perspective, I feel like for me, it's putting yourself in more positions. It's putting myself in more conversations. So if I, you know, like Dave said, how does somebody know when you've talked too much? You do it over and over and over again. But to summarize what we talked about today, answer objections before they start was something that came out. Make sure we signal to the buyer.
Neutralize and nullify the objection.
Yes.
Before it's raised. That puts you in a position of power.
Got to signal to the buyer that they're in a safe environment. We want them to feel safe themselves. Got to talk to the identity of the buyer also, Sinjin, making sure that we have the most accurate and informed way to present them with the questions to get the answers that we need. And then we close them out with the statement, Dave, I trust I will leave you with your time to do your research because I want you to make the most informed and accurate decision for your business or for your farm. We learned the conversation has more to do with the sales than it does afterwards. Schedule your follow-up. Understand the buying process so that way you know you're following up with the right person at the right time throughout that process. And then be able to put yourself in a position of power when you go through negotiating. Understand that people chase what moves away from them. They want what they can't have, and they value things that are difficult to obtain. And if you can have those points of position, it's going to make it much easier on yourself. Right, Sinjin?
That's such a good summary. Couldn't said it better myself.
Awesome. If people want to find you and get maybe you to talk to their group or their company, what's the best way for our listeners to look you up?
Awesome, guys. I really, really enjoyed our chat here. I've got a site that is ruralsalessuccess.com. On there, you can join my email. You can download my ebook, which is How to Succeed in Rural Sales, where I unpack a lot more of this stuff. Listen to my podcast, which is the Rural Sales Show, where we jam on things specifically rural and ag in the rural sales psychology space. But yeah, if you want to get hold of me, just go to ruralsalessuccess.com. We'll put it in the show notes and you can find me. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dave, you got a challenge?
I do. And man, I've had so many. I got more notes from this podcast. But originally, I just wrote quote of the day. And the quote of the day was, the sale is made in the conversation. And then I got a new quote. And now I have one that trumps that. And it is the best quote, I think, of the year.
Ooh.
I am telling you, I'm tattooing this somewhere. Confidence comes from competence.
That was good.
So the challenge is, if you want to be good at sales, learn what the heck you're selling. Mm-hmm. Learn the product, learn the customer, learn everything about it. If you want to be good, flat out, that's the quote of the century.
I like it.
100%. 100%. I think, sales is an inner game. Everyone thinks it's an outer game. It's an inner game.
Yeah. I think you got it. Well, this has been a pleasure. I said thank you once. I'll say thank you again. We're excited to do this, listeners. We're excited to share this show with you. So until next time.
What about our payoff question?
Have a good one.